activities in Desmos is to use the regression feature of Desmos to do a line of best fit. However, before I do that with my students, we actually use the sliders feature to try to come up with our own line of good fit. And I've done this activity with my students, and I've also done this activity with teachers at a workshop. I actually did this on a Pi Day workshop last year. And basically we first gather data by creating circles and using the string to measure the circumference, and we measure the diameter. And then I have the students enter their diameter and their circumference to the nearest tenth of a centimeter in this Google form. There's a tiny URL for them to get to that. And of course we have issues with rounding directions, of course. But I might have to clean up the data a little bit as I see it being entered. And then we go to our data, and I love this feature of Desmos that we can copy and paste these two columns directly into Desmos. And here's something that was a new feature I know that you added to Desmos, and that was this fit. It zoomed fit. It fit all the data here. Now, when I did this at my workshop on Pi Day 2016, I noticed that this did not happen. So when we initially did our line, when we initially modeled our line, we didn't see these points here. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let me change the viewing window here for a moment to be from like -5 to 15, and change the viewing window then to be from -5 to 45. So last year when I did this at my workshop, this is what we saw. So we, first of all, created our own line of good fit, as opposed to the line of best fit, by just doing y equals mx plus b, creating sliders. And this is what I do with my students. They agree that the y-intercept, it would be reasonable for it to be 0 because technically a 0 diameter circle would have a 0 circumference. So then we play around with the slope, and most of them quickly realize that the ratio of circumference to diameter of a circle is pi. We make some adjustments here with the step being 0.01, and then we play around with it to try to get which line we think is best, and it ends up being approximately pi. So then we see what Desmos produces for a line of best fit, and as I said, when I did this at my workshop in 2016, this is what we saw on the screen. The data was not zoomed, and so when we did our regression line, and I love that we can do this in Desmos because I love that it produces the residuals, so that can help us decide if a line of a line's a better model than a curved model. So this was what we saw last year at the workshop, and so you can imagine my initial surprise and confusion. That doesn't look like the line for that data. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, clearly as the diameter increases, the circumference increases. So what was going on here? So last year in 2016, in March of 2016, this is what happened, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And of course, I was just very confused, and the participants were very confused. And then we zoomed out on the data set, and we saw that there was these extra points here that were influencing the line of best fit. So I actually, even though the feature that you added to fit all the data is nice, I actually don't really like that because we lost out on the fact that we had to identify and problem solve what was going on here. Why was the line being produced have a slope of -0.55? What was going on? And so then we discussed, of course, what happened here, and it seems that the diameter and the circumference were switched when they entered the values into the online form. But it would be nice in Desmos if you kind of had the option somehow of fitting the data. I don't know if there's a way to do that, because the data already gets fit, and then, I don't know, you lose this what's going on here moment. So I don't know if there's a way to allow us to not have that happen when the data gets imported. There is something to be said about students having to determine their own domain and range for a function, or determine their own values for x and values for y as they're setting up their scatter plot. But this was definitely a fun activity to do during the workshop, and it's a fun activity to do with my students. They all quickly realize that the slope is pi, but it's a nice activity because it ties together geometry and algebra and statistics all in one.